Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sheol Mofikoya. I'm a research and extension associate at Kentucky State University, and I'll be moderating this session. So this session is the Farming for Living Soil session, and we have two speakers for today. We have Dennis, and we also have Ben, and I just have some quick announcements, some quick housekeeping before we go on. So I have this session feedback, and I'll be giving it out, and I'll be picking it and collecting it afterwards. Please kindly fill it out, and I'll collect it after the session. And also, if you have any question during the session, please kindly raise your hand, and I'll bring a microphone to you so everybody can hear your question. Let's welcome Dennis. Thank you.
You should wait till we get done before you do that. So I'm glad you're here. Thanks for coming out in the snow. I want to apologize to most of you because when I finish my 30 minutes of mine and Ben's presentation, that there will be some of you that wish I'd have said more, and then a lot of you that wish I would have shut up about halfway through. But there's some of you that this may hit right where it needs to be. But my hope is that you will be challenged in one area of your management as a result of Ben and my presentation. Okay, just if you can be challenged in one area, then I think we've been successful. So do I have a clicker? Do I have or do I have to? Oh, thank you. Okay, so I'd like to start at the beginning, and I can't wander. For me, the beginning is this process represented up here on the screen, and so going back to your high school biology and the plant section maybe, and remember you were told that photosynthesis is the process by which plants transform light energy into, fill in the blank, transform light energy into, sugar. Chemical energy, right, is the answer but yeah, I'll take that answer, into sugars, into carbohydrates. And so this is where soil health starts. Okay, it starts by this process, this elegant, amazing process that most of our neighbors have never given a second thought to, but that you as a grower should think about. This elegant process of fixing carbon dioxide within the plant. And the plant just uses water, sunlight, and CO2 to make these sugars. These energy sources for the plant, and it's making it for itself. It's not making it so that we can pick fruit or graze it. It's making it for itself. But this is the basis of life, isn't it? We don't have life if we don't have this process going on, because by this, light energy is transformed into chemical energy. Okay? So there, for the nerds in the room, that's the way we would express that. So this, here's I don't know what I just did. Here's CO2, water, light energy, and then you get sugar or carbohydrates, and it gives off oxygen. What we're interested in related to soil is that a lot of that fixed carbon dioxide that ends up in the plant transforms into a myriad of carbon-containing compounds, lots of different things. And some of those it gets rid of through the roots. Roots die, and it gives off some of those things. And a lot of that plant material ends up as soil organic carbon. And soil organic carbon is the key to our soil health systems. And so we want to optimize soil organic carbon. So organic carbon is we say it's about 50% of the organic matter. That's probably pretty accurate. So half of the organic matter in your soil is soil organic carbon. So how do you think that soil organic carbon functions? It's all these carbon compounds. What do the organisms use that for in the soil? What do they use it for? Energy, right? Energy, food. Soil organic carbon is a source of energy, food. Organisms oxidize the carbon in all of these different kinds of carbon compounds, and they give off some of it as CO2, but a lot of it they use to build bodies, more cells, whether it's bacteria, fungi, earthworms, whatever the organism is. They're utilizing this carbon, right? And that's why we're looking at this slide, this carbon that's fixed carbon dioxide. So it has to start there. One of the things I want you to note about it is that this is always happening. I don't have a pointer. Sorry. So this is always happening. So as long as plants are growing and there's adequate soil moisture and it's daytime, CO2 is being fixed. And some of that carbon's ending up in the soil as soil organic carbon. But that other process is also going on all the time. Respiration. Well, not all the time. If you live around here, it's not going on the past week. Okay? Because this is done by living organisms that are actively functioning. So if you live near me, not much CO2 evolution from the soil has been. But nonetheless, this is during the normal growing season, this is happening. This is happening. So we're always losing carbon. So what does that mean if we want to maintain soil health? Got to replace it, right? You got to replace it. We can't stop that, and we don't want to. That's where we get so much of the benefit, that CO2 evolution, because what that means is that the organisms are active and they're doing the things we like for them to do. Does that make sense? Right? So this is a process that's happening. So we're losing CO2, which means the CO2 has to be replaced, or carbon has to be replaced. So if we were to represent kind of life in the soil by this figure that I have up here, so here are our organic residues. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So this is all stuff that at one time used to be part of a plant, even if it's manure. Manure started as a plant way back when, didn't it? So these are products of photosynthesis. So they're carbon rich, organic carbon rich. And so those things are the residues, whether they're below ground or above ground residues, and they're acted on by soil organisms. And so you can see, and the arrows represent things that are using the previous thing for an energy source. So they're using the carbon, the carbohydrates in there for an energy source. So our large things, everybody loves earthworms. And one of the things we love about earthworms related to soil health, they make channels and all that, but they break down big pieces of organic material into smaller pieces. And so what that does is it gives other organisms greater access to things like leaves and stalks and stems. So they're breaking down big pieces into smaller pieces. Smaller pieces decompose easier. Okay? And so the main takeaway from this is that at every step you see here with the different organisms, energy is being transferred. So in other words, carbon is being oxidized. The carbon that started in photosynthesis, right? That's why we talked about that. And that an important soil process is happening. The things that we want. What are the things we want from our soil? We want it to be aggregated. Aggregated soils infiltrate water. They hold water. We want it to cycle nutrients. These guys are critical for cycling nutrients because organic nutrients have to be made inorganic, right, to be taken up by plants. So aggregation, these are critical for aggregation. They're critical for nutrient management. We know that some soils suppress pests better than others, or they benefit plant growth better than others. These guys are the ones that do that. Okay, so we're a long way. We're a long way in science from being able to look at a particular group of, let's say, bacteria and say, okay, this genera of bacteria are responsible for this plant health benefit. Okay, we're not there yet because the systems in the soil are so complex. But what we do know is that what we want to do is we want to encourage as much diversity in these systems as possible. And we do know that. So we want to make sure we have adequate, regular availability of soil organic carbon to drive our systems. Okay, most of you have seen something like this, right? 4 soil health principles. So what do we want? Our goal in our systems for managing our soil is to improve function, because soil health is nothing more than soil function. We want to improve the functioning of our soils to benefit the plants. Is that it's a system. So it's not desirable to just pull one of these quadrants out of this circle and say, I'm going to do that. But what we want to achieve the greatest benefit, we need to incorporate all 4 of these things on the same piece of ground. So minimizing disturbance, maximizing cover, maximizing diversity, and maximizing living roots. So here's the challenge, though. That's just 4 things. The 4 things that we do, principles we call them, or concepts or goals, is that every farm represented here looks different. Not only physically and biologically is it different, but you have different constraints that you're operating under. You have different goals and objectives. You have different finance. You have different time. So all these things are I don't know, obstacles that have to be overcome to implement these systems, or challenges that have to be figured out for you to say, okay, how do I incorporate those 4 principles on my piece of ground to optimize benefit? So the verb is important. The verb in each of these, maximize, minimize, that's the verb, okay? Someone said one time, soil health is a journey. So there's always opportunity for improvement. There's things we can tweak and do better. So we want to maximize and minimize. It's not going to be like we're going to do the very best that we possibly can. That's not the point. The point is to start somewhere and maximize or minimize what you can right now and on piece of ground in this place. And the devil is in the details, like most of life, right? So applying the principles, let's talk about disturbance. Limit the frequency and intensity of soil disturbance. That's pretty clear, right? So how do we do that? So, tillage seems to be, it's a necessary evil in organic systems, I guess. Organic annual systems, anyway. So we need to ask some questions. Can I minimize the intensity, extent, time of tillage? Can I use my tillage differently? Can I do things like strip till? If you were in Emily's presentation this morning, she talked about some things they're doing where they're essentially strip tilling. They're leaving mulch, either dead or living mulch, and they're just tilling the area where the crop is being planted. And so avoiding full width tillage, I guess, is the point. Managing grazings. Overgrazing is a form of biological disturbance. And then practicing IPM. Pest management, even for you organic folks, can be a disturbance. Some of you use copper sulfate. It's an effective fungicide. But use it. Just because you're organic, and most of you guys realize this, doesn't mean you don't have to practice IPM, right? Judicious and only necessary use of things like copper sulfate for fungus, for disease management. So the benefits. So we help retain soil organic carbon. Disturbance, tillage oxidizes carbon. So we immediately, upon tillage, if it's warm and moist, we're blowing CO2 off to the atmosphere. So we're losing soil organic carbon. Preserves aggregates and when we till, we just physically break up those aggregates that we want that are so important for water infiltration and water storage. And habitat for biology. Biology live in the aggregates. Bacteria live inside of pores of microaggregates, and fungi help form macroaggregates. And then we preserve habitat. Soil cover. Minimize the time the soil surface is not covered. And that would be either with a living or dead plant material is ideal. So we want to keep the soil covered. It's soil armor. Cover should consist of plants or plant-derived material. Non-composted mulch can immobilize nitrogen. So what I mean by that is if you don't have if you're using a mulch for a compost material, an organic material mulch that's not thoroughly composted, the carbon to nitrogen ratio in that material will be so high, or can be so high, that you will immobilize, make nitrogen unavailable to your crop. Some of you may have experienced that. So we want to be sure that if we're not using well composted material, that we have adequate supplemental nitrogen available for our crop. Because what will happen is the organisms in the soil will get first dibs at soil nitrogen, and crop won't. So they need nitrogen to grow, and if there's a lot of carbon, then they're going to grow, and they need nitrogen to make things like amino acids and DNA, and so they will tie up nitrogen, and it won't be available to your plant, and your plant will be nitrogen deficient. Biodegradable plastic mulch and polyethylene. So when you look at the literature on its effect on soil health, there's kind of mixed results. Some people say, no, there's no negative effect. Some people say, yeah, there is a negative effect. But at the very least, it's going to change that biological community that we talked about. So it will modify the biological community, either push it toward more fungi, more bacteria. So just be aware of that, right? I know the reality for some of you is that you use those things. If you are, biodegradable plastic mulch is preferable. But indications are some of that stuff doesn't biodegrade very quickly, so just be aware of that. Still small pieces after years. And then if you are using, cover crop as soon as possible after the removal of the mulch. Again, we want to get carbon, here we go again, we want to get carbon back in the soil. And the best way to do that is to grow a plant. And the best way to get carbon in the soil is to grow a plant. And then these benefits that we get from keeping the soil covered. We intercept raindrops. We retain aggregates because raindrops are bad on tearing up soil aggregates. We get greater infiltration, less erosion. Weed, moisture, and temperature management. We know about those things that we get from cover residue or from cover crop residue, and then the carbon source for biology. I'll just say this: if you have residue, your residue can be a pest habitat. Slugs is the example that's come up a lot over the past few years. People that have a high residue covers and plant their crop into it, some people have seen a lot of slug pressure. Build increased plant diversity, and this could be a variety. It could be different plant species, different plant families, what we call functional groups. That would be things like legumes or other broadleaves, warm season grasses, winter grasses, that type of thing. Species, so this is an important point. Species and even varieties, we know, they recruit particular soil organism communities. So that's been well demonstrated, and that work started a long time ago, where plants will recruit particular bacterial communities. And they do that by leaking some of the carbohydrates that they've got through photosynthesis to recruit those things, and there's some benefit to the plant for that. Intercropping is an option. Relay cropping is an option to develop diversity. Intercropping, Emily's example of them pursuing living mulch would be an example, I think, of intercropping. Cover crops, we'll say more about them, but they're a great opportunity to increase diversity. Interseeding pastures to add diversity. And can you add a perennial to your rotation? Some of you may be able to. Perennials are a great way to modify soil and add diversity. So here, I'll just let you look at those things for the sake of time. So those are the things, some of the benefits that we would see from our diverse plant systems. Living roots. So keep a living root as much as possible. So the best way to do this, and I'm gonna talk more about cover crops if I don't run out of time, is with cover cropping. There's, I hesitate to say this almost, but in a room full of farmers, but you have to have a pretty good excuse to not grow a cover crop. I mean, you really do. And I just made a mess out of myself. And I don't know what that would be, okay? I would like to talk to you afterwards if you want to try to convince me that there's no way you can grow a cover. Just with the things that are available and opportunities to do that. So benefits. Covers give us all kinds of wonderful things, right? They're the diversity, and we already said that different plants exude different carbon compounds into the soil that result in different soil biological communities. Help reduce compaction, increase soil organic carbon. The roots are slower to decompose than above ground plant materials, so there's a carbon source available in the soil longer, even if that's tilled, and contribute to improved water infiltration. So let's talk about cover crops. We can achieve 3 of the 4 principles, remember? We can maximize cover, maximize diversity, and maximize living roots. So the three of the 4 principles we can achieve simply by growing a cover crop. So we can reduce nutrient and input costs. You know this, that legumes fix in, and that end can be available to subsequent crops, or even the currently growing crop. Cereals or other covers can scavenge nutrients. Those nutrients can be held in the tissue, again, because that plant tissue has to go through decomposition so that those organic forms of things like nitrogen in the plant are mineralized into inorganic forms. So they are a good sink for nutrients. Weed management, growing covers competes with weeds for light, water, and nutrients, if we can get them established in a timely way. And residue blocks light, alters temperature to reduce weed germination. And then we're not going to talk about allelopathy. Allelopathy is a thing, and there are some covers that produce chemicals that can inhibit germination of seed, particularly small seeds. So they've seen a lot of success with cereal rye in the southeast for something called Palmer amaranth, which is a problem pigweed that's become resistant to a lot of herbicides. So what some growers are finding is that cereal rye can be a large enough cover of cereal rye can be an effective allelopathic control to help with Palmer amaranth. Disease and insect suppression as a result. So host beneficial soil microbes. So we can recruit microbes that are beneficial to our crop plants, create less hospitable disease environment, host insect predators and parasitoids, compounds that reduce parasitic nematodes while at the same time encouraging beneficial nematodes. Not all nematodes are our enemies, and you probably already knew that. Soil health improvement. Covers can improve water infiltration, reduce compaction, and help build aggregates. So if you have a compaction problem, there are species that you can use to help alleviate that. Provides soil organic carbon and enhance nutrient cycling. Reduce erosion. Growing covers intercepts raindrops, reduces wind erosion. Roots hold soil in place. Residue provides soil cover. Soil moisture conservation. Obviously, residue left on the surface reduces evaporation, but even lightly or surface incorporated residue, like some of you may be doing, will help hold moisture in that surface soil layer. Cover crop resources. And just today, it just goes to show, I became aware of one that didn't end up on my little slide here. Kentucky Horticulture Council, you guys probably knew about them, right? They have a cover crop selection tool. So here are some selection tools that are out there in the World Wide Web world. But also check out, they've got a table right out here, Kentucky Horticulture Council. And that young man out there developed a cover crop selection tool. So if you're wondering what to plant, because that's always a question, what do I plant, right? For my situation, what do I plant? Here are some other ones. You should have that book, Managing Cover Crops Profitably. It's a sustainable ag research and education book. You should have that if you don't. And then there's some different things. The Oregon State thing there in the middle, if you're not aware of that, it's not so much a selection tool, but what it is, it's a nutrient availability calculator. So these guys put this together to say, okay, if you're growing this cover and you determine what the nutrient value is in that, what is the plant available nitrogen primarily that's going to be coming out of that crop? So it might be helpful to some of you. Oh gosh, what did I do? Okay, so and you can find that. That's Organic Fertilizer and Cover Crop Calculator, Oregon State. So starting, or maybe you're already doing covers. So the first question I always ask, what do you want to do? Why do you want to grow a cover? You'd be surprised. That's not always an easy question to answer, but it needs to be answered up front so that we know what to grow and how to manage it. What is the best place and time to incorporate covers? Start with a small area. You don't need to do the whole farm. Do some if you're starting out. Where can covers fit in the rotation? Winter? Can you grow a summer cover after a spring harvested crop? Maybe you can do both. What's the following crop? That's an important question to answer because some covers are incompatible or less compatible with crops that follow them. How do you plan to manage? How will you seed? Will you broadcast? Will you drill? If planting a mix, are the things that you're planting going to be compatible in growth form and maturity? That's not always a big deal, but it helps if you're just starting out to not grow things that are not going to have the same growth form or same maturity time. It just makes life easier for you as you're learning to do this. How will you terminate? Real important. What are you going to do? You're going to mow? You're going to mow and plow? You're going to mow and whatever. And what's your contingency plan? You got to have a contingency because things are not going to work the way you planned it. It'll either rain too much or not enough, and you'll need to terminate your covers early or later. And so have a contingency plan. Do the species you want to plant meet the objectives? Refer to number one. What are the objectives? And are your varieties proven to perform in your area? There's something called black oats out there, but I don't think black oats has been proven to work in zone 6A or 6B or wherever we are up here. It's a more southern thing. So make sure what you have is going to fit. So here's Planting and termination methods and timing greatly influence outcomes. The later you plant, if we're talking a winter cover, the less benefit you're going to get out of that cover crop. Plant whenever you can. If you need to plant at the end of October, fine. But ideally, you want to plant before September's over for winter cover, because the biomass and the benefits you get, and then termination obviously influences outcome. So set yourself up for success. Seek out farmer mentors, people that have been growing covers. There's lots of you in this room. Consult with soil health specialists. I think Oak has one on staff, right? Yes. So take advantage of that. Attend field days, you're doing that. Assess resource. What do you have and what do you need? You want to be sure that what you want to do, you have the resources to do it. Set short and long-term goals. What do I want to see accomplished? I have seen cover crop benefit in one season. Side-by-side trial comparisons where no covers, soil has changed visibly in one season. And this is in the southeast in sandy loam soils. So it's possible. Covers can make an incredible difference. Start small and keep reasonable expectations. Get to know your soil. So keep records are critically important. Know what your soils are, what they're capable of, and how they change. How are they changing year to year after 5 years? And don't get too hung up on things like soil organic matter. It might be a useful test, but you'll see changes in your soil. You'll see changes related to water infiltration and color and biological activity and root growth. Conduct your own iron farm, and this doesn't need to be replicated trials. Just, I want to try something. I want to try this different cover species. I want to try this mixture. If you're just starting out, I would suggest you don't start with cover crop mixtures. Pick a species, and if you want to add species to it later, be patient and willing to accept failure, because there will be farmers, right? And farmers know that. And then don't give up. So keep at it. It's worth the journey. And I'm done, Ben.
Do you have questions?
Maybe do you want to wait till
After Ben.
Yeah, let Ben go, and then maybe.
There's going to be a lot of questions after I go. All right, thank you, Dennis. That was awesome. Thanks to the Oak staff for asking me to be a part of this workshop. Jenny asked me to take part in this and to partner up with Dennis after coming out to our farm, Rootbound, for a field day where we looked at how we are integrating livestock into our cropping systems. So I'm going to talk to you guys today a little bit about how we farm at Rootbound, the production systems we put in place, and how we think we are creating a healthy, living, abundant soil that's growing healthy, nutrient-dense crops that nourish our bodies, that nourish our community, and that nourish the land that we're farming on. As organic farmers, we're telling a story. We're telling a story to our community and to each other about how we're caring for the land, and in doing so, we're caring for the people we feed. Well, we want that story to be true. And so what I want to do today is express confidence in the way that we are farming at Rootbound, and I also want to be clear about our vulnerabilities and our uncertainties about how we're farming, so that we together can learn how to continue to grow this movement and grow our skills as farmers. Do I have a presentation? I think I do. How do you make the presentation come to life? It's not, my presentation is not good. But I do have some pictures on there. But I'm just going to keep talking because, like I said, it's really just a handful of pictures. I am sure, like many of you, I'm not as good at taking pictures as I should be. There's things that happen on the farm that I'm not proud of, that I love to take pictures of, and things that I'm proud of that I love to take pictures of. But ultimately, when I scroll through my pictures, I mostly find like things from when my kids stole the phone and are taking videos of them dancing to K-pop Demon Hunters or things of the like. So we tell a story. We tell a story about nurturing the land, about nurturing the soil. The soil is the foundation of organic farming. We've got our Jesse's out there selling his hats, the soil nerd hats. At Rootbound, we came up with a mantra when we first started farming: feed the soil, feed the soul. Because we know that the healthy soil is the foundation for what we do, whether it's livestock or it's cropping systems, annuals, perennials, whatever. We cannot succeed in growing organically without a healthy soil. So how do we farm, and are we creating a healthy living soil? I'm going to start by giving a little bit of background. My wife, Bree Pearsall, and I started Rootbound Farm 14 years ago. The reasons that drew us to farming are many of the reasons we continue to do so today. To build community around the bounty of the cultivated and natural world, to nurture the health of ourselves, our employees, and our customers, and to nurture the health of the land. While we started off working full-time, farming on the side, after a few years, we started farming full-time. We've been doing that for 11 years at Rootbound. We are a CSA farm. We started off with 75 members 11 years ago, and last year we provided CSA shares for 1,200 families a week off of our farm for 32 weeks in our growing season. We grow for groceries, restaurants, food hubs, but the primary thing we do is grow for our CSA. We farm a little over 300 acres. We lease all of our land. We don't own any land. 50 of the acres are in tillage agriculture. On an annual basis, we're cropping about 75 acres because we double crop half of our acreage. But we have 50 tillable acres. Oh, go ahead. I didn't send it in until last night at 8 o'clock, and it was due over a week ago. So this is no one's fault, but my, yeah, thank you, sir. Awesome. So let me get that clicker. Thank you, sir. All right. So there we are. So this is, anybody that knows us, that's our sun sage. That's 6 years ago, but it's kind of this time of year, so that's why I saved the picture. Also, he's really cute. But I put that picture up there because it's about this time of year 6 years ago. It's a field of leeks in mid-January. It's showing a little picture of just our farm, of our veggies. So we grow crops. We grow on 300 acres, 50 acres of crop ground. And in 2015, we started incorporating livestock. We farm what I call traditional organic, okay? So traditional organic is a tillage system, annual cropping, tillage, bed shaping, planting crops, etc. And about a decade ago, we knew that in order to truly have a system that has an attempt at being a closed loop, that is a regenerative system, that isn't inherently extractive, that we needed to incorporate livestock into our production system. And so a lot of what I'm going to try to get into is how we use livestock to try to balance out that intensity of vegetable production, and how do we try to use that as part of our soil building, soil fertility program, and restore the life to the soil that vegetable production in the style that we do perhaps somewhat depletes on an annual basis. So we got into livestock for those reasons, and also, of course, to provide healthy protein to our customers. When you do a CSA type farm, you're building a community of trust. You're building a relationship with folks, and ultimately, it's amazing to fill that market basket and to provide as much as you can for those families that you know and love, and that know and love you. So right now at Rootbound, I mentioned our CSA size, our acreage. We also raise the animals. We have about 200 Katahdin ewes. We'll have 300 lambs annually, so our peak flock size will be about 500 sheepies. It sounds like a lot, but they would fit in half the size of this room. I mean, if you stuffed them in there, you know. And then we have about 3,400 laying hens on the farm right now that we raise certified organic pastured laying hens. We got about of those, it's about 1,300 15-month-olds, 2,100 chickies. I got a few weeks ago. And last fall, we bought 12 cows. to begin raising beef on the farm. So the animals are there in service of the produce. And when we looked at expanding, whether it was into poultry or beef cattle, what we're looking for is manure. So they're there to become the perpetual manure machine in service to the crop production. All right. Let's see. Nothing interesting here. There we go. This is chickens in the winter. So we raise the chickens on pasture because we're moving them onto our crop fields and onto our pasture that's in between our crop fields. We have mobile hoop houses that we built on skis. Each house will have about 400 to 500 laying hens in it, and we move it every 2 days. With the broilers, we also raise broilers. We'll move those every day. All right, so there's our sheeps on pasture, and then we also rotate those onto the crop fields seasonally. So we're going to get into that here in a little while. All right, sheeps. Farming is just kind of goofy. That's why I put that up there. All right, so I said we are a traditional organic farm. That's how I learned how to farm. That's how I find it possible to produce on scale in a manner that I believe is still sustainable, that still cares for the land, that grows an abundance of healthy produce. So that means annual tillage. That means a sort of rinse and repeat cycle of plowing in the spring, bedding, secondary tillage, planting of crops, harvesting of crops, incorporation of crop residue, planting of cover crops, grazing of cover crops. Grazing of cover crops maybe in a few different slots. That's essentially what we do. It's rinse and repeat every year, that same system. And when we graze, we're paying attention to the 90-120 day for organics. And we're paying attention to what outcome we're looking for on that particular field with the grazing. So what's our annual production cycle look like? We have over 100 fields on the farm. They're all half acre, 50 foot by 400 foot. It's roughly a half acre. Our farm is standardized, and that allows us to develop a rotation, develop a production system that's replicable, that's trackable, that's traceable, that we can manage as a system. That's what we're trying to do. Farming is messy, it's crazy. It's not a science. We're not producing widgets, but to the extent possible, we want to try to develop a systems-based approach so that we can add a little bit of order to the madness, to the chaos. We use a primary tillage tool of what's called an articulating spader. A spader is considered a conservation tillage tool. Are people familiar with articulating spaders? Okay, very cool. So it looks in some ways like a rototiller, but it functions a little bit differently. It has big spades on it, in which it's biting into the soil profile and shattering the soil profile and moving it backwards. It usually works in an 8 to 10 inch working depth, and it's considered considered a conservation tillage tool because you're making a lot fewer passes through the field. You know, when I first started farming, we were either using a mold board or a chisel plow, which you then follow with a disc, a heavy disc, maybe disc twice, 3 times, and then harrow. So it's incorporating generally those 4 passes into 1 pass and to achieve a final seed bed. If you're planting row crops, you usually are planting right into it. If you're planting tillage row crops in a tillage system, you can plant right after. For vegetable crops, you generally are doing some sort of secondary tillage. So when you use a spader, you're incorporating organic matter throughout the soil profile as opposed to a mold board when you're usually burying your organic matter. So you have a lot more aerobic action on that organic matter, which of course stimulates soil life. You are still disturbing those aggregates. You are still probably having both a detrimental effect and maybe also a beneficial effect at the same time by working in organic matter, working in residue, but at the same time breaking up some aggregates, like Dennis was talking about, which can be detrimental to the microbial communities. Less CO2, fewer passes. Maybe it's good. I think it's good. That's a terrible picture. I just got it off the internet. We have one. We use it every year, and I guess I've never taken a picture of it. But you get the idea. It's got a harrow on the back. Unfortunately, you don't see the front, but it's a bunch of shovels butting into the soil. So we do secondary tillage. Secondary tillage is probably where we're experiencing a more negative effect on our soil microbial communities, our fungal networks, certainly. Because in our secondary tillage, we are breaking up those aggregates into much smaller pieces. So especially when it comes to the type of vegetable production we do, what you're striving for is a uniform, consistent seed bed. A uniform, consistent seed bed allows you to have better crop establishment, better germination, especially of small-seeded crops. It allows you to manage and harvest the crop more consistently because you have a level, even seed bed, better crop establishment, less residue on the surface, which, although it's good for maintaining a cool soil, for protecting, retaining soil moisture, etc., the residue is also a problem when it comes to killing weeds. And if you're in the game of tillage agriculture, you're going to have a lot of weeds. And so we need to have a seed bed that's ready to be mechanically cultivated by hand, by hose, by fingers. You don't want a lot of trash up there. The secondary tillage approach is having a much more aggressive action on the soil, breaking up aggregates even smaller, and preparing it for that planting. That's a picture of the bedder that we use. It's called a mulcher or a bedder. And again, this isn't our farm, but this is roughly what it looks like. So even, smooth hills. All right, so what are we doing post-secondary tillage regarding soil health, regarding things that maybe affect soil health? We're incorporating amendments. We use commercial organic fertilizer in our production system. So we're buying bone meal, feather meal fertilizer. We're working that in. Of course, there's probably an explosion in or a activation of the microbial community when we're incorporating that. It's essentially feedstock for bacteria, maybe a little bit for mycorrhizae. We're fertigating. So something this year we're trying or going to try this year is a lot more use of essentially purchased inputs. So mycorrhizae, beneficial bacteria that we're reapplying to the soil. So certainly we are disturbing that in that top 4 inches during that secondary tillage pass. And there's an idea that you could sort of reestablish that to some extent. You can recolonize the roots, you can recolonize the soil profile. And we are already irrigating, we're already incorporating amendments. And so what crop benefits can we see by doing that? I don't think Dennis said it quite like this, but we are managing the soil maybe for the planet. Hopefully, we're maybe trying to sequester some carbon in some ways that we produce, or some ways that we farm organically. We're also managing the soil in service to ourselves and our crop production, right? And so when we look at amendments, or we look at applying things, you are in the input agriculture game, right? We're trying to reduce that with the animal agriculture, kind of build that closed loop system. But I also think it's maybe reasonable to expect that we may need to be using some inputs as well. And that maybe is something like buying in mycorrhizae or bacteria, organically approved, maybe something that's beneficial. Of course, we're mulching. We mulch with plastic mulch. I thought that was interesting that Dennis said there's some research on how that may affect the microbial communities. I think possibly there's some negative effects. It makes sense. Maybe also some beneficial effects, because one of the things I know that does limit microbial activity, of course, is moisture. And we're able to have a much more consistent moisture profile when we use plastic mulch in the tillage system, because you're shading the soil. That's plastic mulch. Very interesting. All right. So now how are we really trying to build soil? How are we really trying to bring life back to the soil, bring fertility back to the soil? And it's really when we get into cover crops and into our incorporation of animals into the system. So we use a lot of different cover crops on the farm, and it's all depending on the seasonal slot that we're planting it and what's following. So our foundational cover crop, the thing that we use the most by far, is winter rye, cereal rye. That's probably pretty consistent with a lot of the other organic farmers in Kentucky I talked to, and really maybe throughout the East Coast, especially the Midwest and Northeast. Winter rye is sort of it's the foundational cover crop. It's super high biomass. It has an amazing fibrous root system. If you're using it for a no-till setup, you can roll it down, you can crimp it. It does have some allelopathic effect. It's an amazing cover crop. We also choose it because it's an amazing forage. And when we're planting our cover crops, we're always looking at what is their forage value. So we're not planting any cover crop that isn't also going to be grazed. So when we can, we're going to plant crimson clover with our rye, but we're only doing that if we're planting it early enough, or else we're just kind of wasting money, really, because it's not going to establish enough. So for us, winter rye is really, I don't know what I wrote down, mid-September until through, so maybe a little bit later September through November. We're planting rye exclusively if we're starting not until October, because it won't give time for the crimson clover to really establish. It might germinate and sit there, but we're going to graze that, and we're going to graze it early winter, and so that's just going to get waxed, really. So we don't really plant the crimson clover in the system unless it's early. Oats and peas is our go-to cover crop. If starting in early August through the end of August, maybe a little bit September, just depending on what the weather's looking like. Oats and peas are awesome. Again, super high biomass. We're getting a little diversity in there. And they're an awesome late fall forage. So when we're able to get those oats and peas in early, we get a lot of late summer, early fall growth, and we can graze that in late October and have an awesome forage. And we can convert a lot of that above ground biomass into manure, make it a little more digestible for those soil microbes maybe, and bring some fertility back into our soil. And we're always planting, with that, groundhog radishes when we can, again, if it's early enough. So we're not going to plant groundhog radishes if it's not until October. But if we're getting in August and September, we're going to plant groundhog radishes with the rye clover, crimson clover, and or with the oats and peas. They're, again, awesome forage value. The sheep will pull the radishes up out of the ground and eat them like apples. This is our first year having cows. Maybe they'll do the same. I think they will. And, of course, you also have some breaking up of hard pan. You have some just infiltration. You have these holes after the radishes rot. Late winter, those create these holes in the soil that just have these cool water infiltration, some diversity in the leveling of the topography of the soil, which I think is great for runoff management. In the summer, we're pretty much exclusively planting Sudex or sorghum Sudan grass if we're cover cropping, mostly because of its forage value. So I think we could probably put some like buckwheat or something like that in there. Generally, we're not going to put in cowpeas or soybeans into that mix because the Sudex is just going to overrun it, and in my experience. And I'm sure you could adjust your seeding rates and not have that happen. But what we're really going for is a highly palatable, high biomass grass that's taking off in July and August. It's not raining. It's a C4 photosynthetic process, so it barely needs moisture to convert that sunlight into energy, and it's able to just put on a lot of growth, and we're able to graze that at a time of year when we don't have another high value or a high quality forage for our livestock to graze. So ideally, we'll get some Sudex in there. I can't read that. So we're grazing the cover crops of the ruminants, the late October, the oats and peas, I mentioned that, and the rye. How are we grazing the rye? So rye is, we have rye planted on 45 acres right now. So most of our cover crop is rye. The rye we are grazing starting in mid-December, early January. Maybe we're kind of running out of a little forage, and we're kind of trying to do a light graze on it. Grazing rye then has awesome, it's not really high biomass right there because there's not a ton of it, right? You know, you've got maybe 5 inches above ground, but it's highly palatable, it's sweet, it's delicious. The animals love it. It's like microgreens, you know, the time of year when they're eating sort of like stockpiled fescue or dried up grass or hay. It's an amazingly high quality forage. When you're grazing at that time of year, you're still getting some root sloughing, so you're building below ground biomass. And then you're also going to create a lot more tillering of that rye in the spring because you're biting the plant down. So it's actually going to, in the spring then, create a lot more above ground biomass because it's kind of been pruned down. So what we're trying to be careful about then is not overgrazing on the rye because we don't want to muck up our soils, and it's easy to muck up your fields this time of year. So we're trying to get the animals out there long enough to get that first 1 or 2 bites, but not so long that they are, one, ripping the plants up, eating it down to the dirt, and or just mucking the fields up. So that's what we've been doing for the last month until it snowed. We had all our livestock, a few hundred sheep, handful of cows out there eating the rye cover crop. We do that every year. We'll graze the rye again in the spring after spring growth starts to take off. The rye is often growing again in February, but maybe it's, I'm thinking maybe mid-March sounds about right, when we're kind of maybe late March, when we're starting to have enough growth to get them back onto that. And we'll graze it again in the spring, mid-March through mid-May. Most of our rye is getting worked in before it's senescing, before it's big, before it shoots, before it's going to seed. So we were really, by mid-May, we're moving on to other things. All right, poultry. So we have a lot of chickens, and we try to get them over our crop fields when we can. It's harder to do, and it's mainly harder to do partly because of the coop system we use. So we use high tunnels on skis. The cover crop has to be well established enough so that you're not in mud or dirt. So cover crop is nice. You got that awesome below ground root system, of course, but ultimately it's a crop. It's an annual crop, and so you have some bare ground on the soil surface, and it's not going to be like dragging something or driving over pasture, right? An established perennial pasture. So as you're moving chicken houses across annual crop fields, you just have to make sure you're doing it in a season when the establishment is thorough. So that's sorghum Sudan grass after it's been grazed in August and September. That's oats and peas after it's been grazed in late October, because you have all that biomass protecting the soil, or that's rye after it's been grazed in the late fall. So the chicken, unlike the ruminants, the chickens of course are grazing, but we're really looking for fertility deposition with the chickens. It's an animal we're feeding, so we're bringing that feed off the farm, and they're sort of like moving fertility on the farm. Unlike the ruminants, where we're using sunlight and photosynthesis to get them to kind of manage biomass and turn it into manure and bring fertility on. So it's a little bit of a different system, similar benefits. Organic matter being consumed, converted to manure. More aggressive biomass growth in the spring because of the tillering, and of course all that root sloughing that's happening when you're grazing your grass. Just like when you're grazing in perennial pastures, you're creating root sloughing underground, building soil organic matter. So I guess I want to just talk a little bit about how things have changed over time on the farm. This gets to the story we tell and the desire for it to be true. So I'm not a consultant, an academic, or an expert. I'm just a farmer. So I make my living tilling the soil, planting crops, caring for them, harvesting them, managing livestock, moving them through the pastures. And our data is mostly experiential. It's mostly anecdotal. And it's learning from our mistakes, which are many, and it's trying to adapt and improve. And our ultimate goal is to be nurturing the soil, nurturing the land in a way that makes sure we're not depleting the soil resources, so that every year is better than the year before. Because ultimately, the soil is going to keep us honest. And if we're not caring for the soil and we're not nurturing the soil, we're going to have crops that are on a decreasing arc of quality, right? Decreasing yield arc. And what we want is that increase to be happening. So what has our story been? Our acreage peaked in 2022. We tilled over 90 acres in 2022. I think we had our CSA was about half the size it is now, and our overall crop production was a little, maybe 80% smaller than it is now on the farm. So we're tilling, we're planting a lot less acreage, we're producing a lot more food. We have a lot less disease and insect pressure on the farm. We lose very few crops to disease and insect pressure. Compared to the past, most of our crop losses are from deer. I don't think soil quality affects resistance to deer. We're cover cropping more effectively than we ever have. Dennis said, like he said, there's really no excuse. We do still have some land every year that won't be in cover crop. Generally speaking, that's our very late crops that we're still harvesting into late November and December. I think there is still ways to get cover crop on those, and a lot of people do like undersowing rye. We have some great farmers here that do that. That's an area for improvement so that we can make sure even that ground is going in. Oh, way. Okay. So yields are higher, but what hasn't changed? Dennis mentioned soil tests, so that's anecdotal, experiential data. I think things are better. Soil test, I was looking through our soil test from 2013. versus last year. Like our soil organic matter is just the exact same. It hasn't changed. So we're tilling every year. We're sometimes double cropping, tilling twice. But we're planting cover crop every year. We're grazing every year, but not every field every year. So to the extent soil organic matter, as it shows up on a soil test, is a metric, we're not seeing a lot there. There's a lot fancier soil tests now. I know with the Climate Smart grants, we had the opportunity to do some fancy soil tests. And I don't remember what they're called, but maybe somebody does and can mention it in the questions. And we were able to track that. Those soil tests actually were able to sort of gauge your soil, sort of like the soil microbial life in your soil, and to say like, hey, are you nurturing a healthy, what we call a healthy soil? But we only did those once. All right, so I have some questions for myself. How is the soil biology affected by the incorporation of less plant material, more manure? So what are we achieving there when we are grazing all that above ground biomass? It's being turned to manure, and we're working that in. What is that, from a soil organic carbon standpoint, how does that affect those mycorrhizal, those fungal networks, the soil microbial community? How has that changed? I think it's maybe beneficial. I think it means that from a fertility standpoint, we have more available nutrients quicker in a way a plant can digest and uptake the following season. But I don't know that. And then are we doing that at the expense of incorporating that above ground biomass into the soil? So when we don't graze those cover crops, we're mowing them with a flail mower, or if it's a light crop that's winter killed, like Sudex or like oats and peas, we're just working that right in with the spader, and it's incorporating that into that whole soil profile. Again, that's one of the benefits of a spader. It works that organic matter into that full soil profile, so we have that huge amount of biomass. So the benefits of that versus the benefits of it having been converted to manure. I have questions. And then the time lapse from the time that we graze and to the time manure is incorporated, certainly with poultry, and maybe people here that study poultry or know poultry better than me are going to know this, but when you're grazing poultry on your pastures or on your crop fields, a lot of that nitrogen that's in poultry manure is going to be lost through ammonia. I can't remember what that process is called, but I'll call it ammonification. That's not it. I know Krista knows. So we're losing a lot of that nitrogen before we incorporate it. Maybe that's bad. Maybe we need to be working that in more quickly after, especially when we're grazing poultry on our crop fields. And when we talk, this is just sort of like maybe a little zoom out question, which again, the story of organic farming is we're nurturing the land. We're nurturing the land for future generations. We're nurturing the land to care for our bodies, for our communities, to grow healthy food. When we talk about soil health and we talk about living soil, are we managing it for its direct benefit to that process, to grow for crop quality? And what about other processes? I'm talking about that maybe benefit us as a civilization more long term, maintaining biodiversity, not destroying that microbiome in the soil, sequestering carbon. How do we look at those benefits also that maybe don't have a crop quality benefit, but maybe are things that we really need to be thinking about if we're going to tell this story? So I think that's all I've got. Let's see if I have any. Nothing else? We'll just go back to the picture. All right. So thank you, Tony. Thank you all.
Have you seen any difference in when you have chickens versus your sheep being on soil and the results of impacting your crops? The manure versus the.
I just think that the level of nutrient deposition with poultry is so much higher. So especially if we're running the broiler houses over the crop fields, it's Well, I did a oak talk a few years ago, and I couldn't find the slides, but I dug into the actual amount of fertility that we were getting, per crop field, and I couldn't find it. But it's obvious in the plant response, and you'll see that whether or not you're dragging your hoop houses through your crop fields, working it in, planting a subsequent crop, and that change will last for years. And then you see it, of course, in the pastures. You see it a little more quickly because you see the color of the grass change. And then the sheep, I think it's a little slower. I mean, it's, again, more like anecdotal and experiential. Like, we know the fields that we graze aggressively on a high biomass cover crop create amazing crops. But I don't think you see the response quite as intensely, maybe.
Ben, I don't know whether you've had an experience of 2, 3, 4 weeks of snow cover and how that might impact your production or your plans. So it looks like we're going to have it for 2, 3 or more weeks of snowpack on top of the ground.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of think maybe from the soil standpoint, maybe it's kind of nice. We got a nice little blanket on there. And I know right now we're grazing our cows and ewes on our crop fields. I kind of like that the crop fields now get a little break because it's covered, so they can't graze that rye, and they're not mucking it up. So they're actually out there right now shitting a ton, eating a lot of hay, and it's hanging out on top of the snow, and then it's going to come down, and then that field's going to be wet, and we're going to want to get them out of there before they damage the soil. And so I kind of am liking the snow cover.
So
Dennis?
as affecting plants or soil? Cover crops or? Yeah, no negative benefit. I mean, or no negative result, right? I mean, remember where we live, right? There's places that are snow covered for 5 months, and they have very productive soils. So, yeah, it's related to soil biology has this amazing ability to not do anything and die back when conditions are poor, and then just when conditions are good, explode. So.
I think it's super encouraging that when you're grazing your sheep on your winter rye cover crop, you're seeing an explosion of growth in the spring. And I was wondering if you could just elaborate more on that. Like, have you ever compared them side by side and said, wow, like this is incredible. I can totally see the difference. Because I just think that's an awesome example of grazing a cover crop to actually achieve both forage and additional vegetative matter that you might not otherwise get.
Well, I can't say that we've approached it like in a research level of analysis like that, where we have a side-by-side field. I do know that the grazing does promote more tillering and higher above-ground biomass. And the below-ground biomass, I mostly am knowing that from what I've read, because I'm not really measuring that. But I do know grazing of grasses creates root sloughing off, and then kind of a little bit of extra organic matter from that. But on the above-ground side, I mean, not only are you getting fertilizer that's going to feed that rye in the spring, but you get more tillering. I know we were part of the University of Kentucky's, they did a project with the, anybody do the rye project? Anybody here do the rye project? University of Kentucky Grain Network did a winter rye project with farmers across the state. We were the only organic farm that entered. So we were planting cereal rye for grain harvest. And they said we were the best looking farm out of everyone. And that was our management approach. So we had a higher quality crop, higher yields than a lot of the conventional farms. So again, it's a little bit anecdotal. It's 1 year, but it does seem nice.
I actually have two questions now. One, what year was that research done? Because I might have actually been part of that.
The rye project?
Yes.
My guess would be 2020 or the year we did it, 2020-ish.
I was a part of that project.
Very cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But also the other question I had is with like pasturing your chickens and whatnot, Do you see an improvement for like pest management since you have something out there that's able to eat more insects and whatnot in your fields?
So I mean, the chickens are out there eating the daylights out of bugs, right? But I cannot say that I've seen that have a specific effect on subsequent crops, specific pests. I think overall we have less pest pressure. I'm attributing that to just having a healthier crop that is less susceptible to pest. But I don't know if it's a result of anything that the chickens are consuming or just if they're building that soil and fertility.
I was wondering if Dennis could comment on the ammonification. The chicken manure is sitting on top of the soil versus being plowed under, and the loss of nitrogen.
So it will volatilize, right? Because it started as a gas, and so whether it's chicken litter or cow manure or plant residue left on the surface, some of that nitrogen in there will volatilize, right? And it will be, and it's a microbial process, so it depends on how rapidly that stuff breaks down. Now, for manures, there is some volatilization that just will happen because of the nitrogen in the product. But for plant material, it's mostly dependent upon microbial activity. Does that answer your question? I mean, there will be some, right? There will be some for surface applied nutrients. So you have to account for that, or because I'm not going to encourage you to necessarily till that in, but there will be some loss of N.
I have a question. Going back to the topic of pest pressure and vegetable production. Is there any research being done, or that y'all may know of, about not that the animals are eating any pests or pest larvae, but actual like changes to the soil biology because of manure deposition that might interrupt the pest life cycle in some way? Is that a thing?
I don't know. We probably have some research people in here. I can say that what we do know is that plants affect soil biological communities, and one of the results that's been demonstrated is that soil biological community can impact soil pest pressure. Okay. Now, I don't know about manure specifically. I don't know what effect that would have. But if we're talking about growing plants, it's been demonstrated that plants will have associated, even at the variety level, not just the species, but the cultivar level, that they will have unique biological communities, and that they share these hard come-by carbohydrates that they get, and one of the benefits they get is plant defense, right? They either recruit or the community deters plant pest pressure. So it's an evolving area of research. So I would think that manure has some effect, but I don't know what that would be.
That's our time. Thank you, Dennis and Ben.